meaningful, okay? And I hope it doesn't last too long. That's the other thing I'm going to say. Now, I presume I unfortunately can't see the photographs that are coming up, but I assume there's one of the spice market. Fine, right, okay. Now, I was on holidays in India a while ago. I was along the Tropic of Cancer, right? That means I was in Gujarat, which is on the border with Pakistan, and then I was in Madhya Pradesh at a tiger reserve, okay? So, very nice. What did we see? We had various things. I'd say we had temples, textiles, and tigers. Clever details, right? Now, what I mean is, in many ways, in temples, we saw the multi-religious nature of Gujarat, right? In textiles, we saw prosperity and progress with crafts. And tigers, puzzled by this one, we saw family relationships, right? Okay. So why did I pick this photograph to start off? Because it's beautiful, right? And you see the beauty of the spices. But what I was amazed at was that this is a spice market with lovely fruit and several of those kind of stalls, maybe 12 or 13. And it was explained to us that the Indians, the Gujaratis, were buying their spices between when we were there in February and the middle of March. And then they wouldn't buy spices after that, which I found really strange. So these people were packing up their spices that day and going to the next market. There you are. Now, the next photo is of a Jain temple. Good. And I was surprised that in Gujarat there were so many religions. And when I say religions, I don't mean denominations of one religion. I mean separate religions. There was obviously Hindus. There was an awful lot of Islam. I couldn't believe how much, but you were up near Pakistan, but I thought Islam would be more or less wiped out. But anyway, lots of Islam. And there were then Jain temples, and that's a Jain temple. And then there were Parsi temples as well. And by the way, there are some Christian churches. In the Mumbai, the colonial bit, we saw a Christian church. And then in some of the craft villages, there were also Christian churches, because the giveaway was the cross on the door of them, right? So I was quite surprised at that. Now, this picture, which isn't the best photograph, right? But it's taken of a 21st century temple. A 21st century religious building built by wealthy people who chose to put their money into this magnificent temple. And out the back of that temple, you've also got lots and lots of other buildings which seem to be like bedroom accommodation for priests, for pilgrims. I couldn't really work it out. We also saw a Hindu church, very like that as well. I didn't have a photograph of it. Equally massive and equally built about 2005, right? So I thought it indicated, well, a lack of secularization. Now, Jainism, I thought I might lecture a little bit about Jainism, right? Partly because, I'll give you the clue, when you go to when you're driving along the road, you see hotels and they've got pure veg written on them with a sign. And I thought, what sort of vegetarianism is that? And I'll tell you in a minute, right? Jainism is an ancient pre-Hindu religion that emphasizes non-violence and spiritual purity. They want to achieve liberation from reincarnation, rebirth. They want to get out of that cycle of rebirth. I actually thought I'd quite like to get into a cycle of rebirth, but anyway, get out of that through self-discipline and minimal harm to other creatures, to human beings and other creatures. So they have got an extreme form of vegetarianism. They don't eat root vegetables. Because root vegetables, when you're lifting them out of the ground, your potatoes and your turnips, you're, damaging insects and other creatures. So pure veg meant that this is a Jain eating place, right, that doesn't serve root vegetables. Don't ask me what they've left to eat, I'm not exactly sure after that. But anyway, they survived. Now, we also visited several Hindu temples, we visited mosques. We also heard the call of prayer in many of the cities we were in, despite the fact that they clearly were thriving Muslim communities there. Our first guide in Mumbai was in Parsi. And the Parsis are, if you remember, Freddie Mercury was an fiddly, I forgot his name, sorry. Anyway, right. Anyway, we saw the Parsi, and we saw past the temples, he pointed out, where they have an eternal Zoroastrian, where they have an eternal flame burning. And the role of the priest is to keep the flame alive, all day, every day. You're not really allowed into them if you're not a Parsi, so we just passed by. Then he took us to Malabar Hill, which sounds for the rich people. It is for the rich people. But at the top of Malabar Hill, there is a Tower of Silence. And a Tower of Silence is a tower, right? And on the top of it, they put the dead bodies. And the dead bodies are meant to be eaten by vultures. And the vultures ate them in 2 or 3 days. Unfortunately for the Parsis, the vulture community has shrunk due to farming medicines, right? And so they use solar panels instead. Well, they're experimenting. And the solar panels don't work as well as the vultures did. So the rich people nearby are complaining about the smell and a few things like that, right, associated with it. Anyway, I thought that was a very different way of actually living. Okay. Now, next photo is of a step well. It's not a very good photograph, but imagine a great big hole in the ground with a kind of inverted church into the hall. Imagine this, only, yes, inverted, yes, easily like this. And it would go down in layers, down to the bottom, which is the roof here. And the roof, the bottom there, is filled with water, right, from a stream or just from the groundwater. And they are beautifully, ornately decorated, as you can see in the photograph, though it's not showing you the whole thing, right? So these places are utilitarian because they're for water storage, because it's a monsoon place, it gets very dry for most of the year, so they need to have water. It's social because of a social function, because it was the women's place for meeting. Men don't go there, men don't collect the water, women go there. There was even one we saw where the royals had a special place to go. The royals didn't collect water, but they went to some sort of closed off place at the top. I'm not quite sure what they were doing there, but anyway, maybe the third reason for it, which is religious, that the women pray and offer gifts to the goddess of the well and seek her blessing, so that a religious function as well. But just look at one of them. It was massive, and they said it was built in a year. Well, we all stood there and basically said we didn't believe that. But they said all the evidence was there that it was built in a year, but can you imagine this upside down and all the layers in it and the water at the bottom? Anyway, there you are. Okay, the next photograph is in Gandhi's ashram in Ahmedabad, right? He lived in this particular room that you see there for 12 years and led the struggle for independence really from here. He made a lot of plans from that little bedroom. This bedroom demonstrates his advocacy of a simple, modest, unadorned way of living, as you can see. The daily use of the spinning wheel, do you see that beside his, quaintly call it a bed, right? He believed that a craft should be practiced daily, and he chose, remember the crafts were done by unclean castes and untouchables, and he was trying to free those people. So he thought it was his duty to show that he engaged in one of them every day. So that's what the spinning wheel is there for. Although obviously most of his work was intellectual and political. And then if you look at the mattress he slept on, well, we wouldn't call it a mattress. It looks about 1 inch in depth, but that's below it is the mattress that he slept on every night. Remember, listen? Anyway, there's where he constructed his big works. Now the fifth photo, right, is a beautifully dressed, proud woman leading her camel, and the camel has got all load of furniture on it, as you see. And what she's doing is, she actually is leading the migration of her family stroke community from dry lands, lands that have just dried up, and she's leading them into the grasslands that they traditionally go to with their animals. And she's obviously going to set up the camp when she gets there with the stuff in the back. There were 2 other camels behind her, 2 other women behind her with the camels. And about, I don't know if it was 20 miles down the road or 10 miles down the road, I don't know, it was half an hour later or 3/4 of an hour later, but sometime later that day, we saw the men coming along, and they had the cows, so that was the cows that were following her, and they had to go with the speed of the cows, and they were coming to join the women. Now, that actually, this idea of traditional migration, our guide had told us before that a lot of the poverty that you saw, that I thought looked like poverty, was in shanty towns outside the main cities. You know, poorly covered tents, right, corrugated iron. And she had kept saying that the people in those were migrants, and that they had migrated to the city during the dry season to get work, and that their real homes were back in the countryside, and they had better houses in the countryside, and these were their temporary shelters for this period that they came here. After seeing the traditional women walking there, I was slightly more convinced about these people when I saw shanty towns, right? Now, the next photograph is, we move on to craft, right? Now, you'll see in this one that, as I said to you, Gandhi had advocated the development of traditional craft of spinning, weaving, and other traditional crafts. And he would have been delighted to see this very successful family. You see the beautiful clothes that he's wearing, that beautiful indigo shirt. And it was a little craft village, but it was very, very comfortable. They were clearly very prosperous. His father had set the business, turned the business from an ordinary weaving business into a business that sells scarves and other woven silk and cotton goods internationally. And it was sort of stunning to see it. And then we saw them later for sale in shops in the city. And so I was very impressed. The second picture, I'm not sure if the second one's come up yet, but it's of the very handsome man dyeing the indigo, dyeing the materials in those little tubs. And he demonstrated there's about 8 tubs there, all at different stages of the indigo dye. And okay, so what I was very impressed with was this: the traditional crafts was bringing prosperity to the traditional villages in the traditional rural areas, right? And they were really doing very well. And then there's a next photograph. As you see us all standing looking around at this weaving, we were totally mesmerized. This is double ikat silk, and this guy there, who had been trained as an architect, has come back to do that. He threads the warp and the weft in different colours, so that the pattern appears identically on both sides of the silk. I mean, it was phenomenal to look at the complexity of it, right? And you thought if he'd had a computer, how quickly it could be done, but he wasn't working with a computer, he was doing it himself. The silk is sold largely for wedding saris, right? Is what it's sold for £1,000. I didn't buy one of them, by the way, right? Okay, the next picture is simply green bee eater, and it's just a beautiful bird. And when we were on various safari trips, we saw lots of beautiful birds. I just thought I'd pick one at random and put it up to illustrate how many beautiful birds we saw. The next is the tiger. I remember I said this is about family relations. So we're in our Jeep and we've been looking for tigers, which is a bit hard to see because they stay in the bushes. And we're driving along and the guide says, oh look, there's a tiger chasing a dog. I didn't see the dog. I believed it was a dog, not a jackal, nothing exciting, an ordinary dog apparently. And then the tiger stopped, and the tiger kind of retraced its steps. And the guide then said, look, he said, there's another tiger who's pursuing it. And we looked, and then you could see the other tiger. I think that's the other tiger. And he could recognize the tigers, and I think the mummy tiger is M15, and this, well, other ones I don't know. And it was the daughter. And he explained that the daughter was on the mother's habitat, the mother's home, and that the daughter is trying to chase the mother out of her home, out of her habitat. And he said she won't do it now, but she will succeed. She will, the woman, the mummy, will move on inside a year. And he said the reason is because the daughter doesn't have the skills to set up her own habitat. So the mummy will be able to do that, so the mummy will move on. So there you are. I'm very glad my daughters aren't like tiger daughters, and I'm sure you're all very glad that your daughter isn't like a tiger daughter as well. Right. I just finishing by saying, there was the occasional luxurious indulgence. As you can see, it's like it's really busy holiday. So I'm saying, after we saw the construction of the Dyer ships, you know those magnificent, great, big Arabian-type ships, and I must have missed this bit earlier. They were in Monville, and we were driving along the road beside the river. And if I said there was a 100-yard gap, I'd be exaggerating. And then we came across the dhows being constructed beside the river in this gap of 100 yards. And there was wasn't like Harlem Wolf's, you know, it wasn't a great big warehouse, there was no security. We actually were able to climb onto one of the dhows, right? They had a ladder up, and there were some men hanging about. They said, yes, go on, get onto the dhows, right? And I just found it amazing. They'd gone out of business at COVID time, and then after COVID realised they could make money. So there were 6 of these, and they were, you know, they weren't quite the height of this church, but they were very close to the height of this church, just in this little place beside the road. And they were going, one of them was nearly completed, and it was going to sail off to Dubai in 3 weeks' time to get its engines fitted, right? But it was an example of another craft industry that is clearly developed and doing very well. So what was my indulgence? After we saw the dhows being built, we went to the sea, to a beautiful beach, and I swam in the Arabian Sea, watching the sun go down, and it was absolutely beautiful. So I had a wonderful adventure in India and learned a lot more, and I could bore you for ages more about it. So thank you very much for listening, and I'm sorry it was off St. Patrick's Day.